Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup in Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. Only last Thursday, as evidence of this rapid offensive buildup was already in my hand, Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko told me in my office that he was instructed to make it clear once again, as he said his government had already done, that Soviet assistance to Cuba, and I quote, pursued solely the purpose of contributing to the defense capabilities of Cuba, unquote. That, and I quote him, training by Soviet specialists of Cuban nationals in handling defensive armaments was by no means offensive. And that if it were otherwise, Mr. Gromyko went on, the Soviet government would never become involved in rendering such assistance, unquote. That statement also was false. Acting, therefore, in the defense of our own security and of the entire Western Hemisphere, and under the authority entrusted to me by the Constitution, as endorsed by the resolution of the Congress, I have directed that the following initial steps be taken immediately. To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace and to stable relations between our two nations. I call upon him further to abandon this course of world domination and to join in an historic effort to end the perilous arms race and to transform the history of man. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world. God willing, that goal will be achieved.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Hopefully that audio came through just fine. I want to welcome you to CJOMC live open mic cast during these very difficult and challenging times. I want to thank all those who are already in the chat room. So thank you for that. Mojo Palms is here. Antoinette, Raven, Village Guy, welcome. Mac Truck, Crypto Kings in the house. Texas Tom Payne, Rory of the Daily Coin. Thank you for being here, Rory. Tito is here. Bill, Sky Queen. Thank you all for joining the live stream. There was a particular, if someone also could just check my audio just to make sure that I'm coming through as well as that last video did. Sometimes when you're flying solo, it's a little bit difficult to manage that all. But there was a very specific reason why I played that video in regards to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And because, you know, many people have said we're dealing with kind of a reverse Cuban Missile Crisis as it relates to Ukraine and Russia. Very specifically, everyone remembers during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was an attempt to place some very heavy arsenal, potentially nuclear weapons. Thank you, Roy. There in Cuba. And as you know, it almost nearly led to nuclear war. There was an embargo. There were specific things that took place. So for that particular reason, I think we have to kind of look at the same thing in regards to the contrast between what happened in Ukraine and the Soviet Union's response. As we know, there's been many numerous attempts to try to resolve that. And I'm going to play a specific video. And I think we're past that 11th hour. I've been listening to a lot of commentary today. in regards to people's thoughts as it relates to, are we currently in World War III? What were the events unfolding? And it's already having significant repercussions, not only in the markets, also the loss of life that's occurring. And I really would hope that we could put a big pause on these events unfolding and try to prevent further escalation. And that's my goal with this live stream tonight. Feel free to jump in the stream. I have posted the link in the comments section of this to join the StreamYard link. You don't have to join by cam if you don't want to. That's perfectly fine. You can turn your cam off. But then also I shared, and this is something new that I'm kind of testing out tonight, so bear with me. I also have a phone line, phone in, and that's also in the description of the video to phone in to participate. Like I said, bear with me, and as I'm running tech and have several things to show. So I think we're in that point right now where we're getting so many different messages coming through, and the frequency is it's a struggle on what to believe. We're getting the narrative that the United States media is putting out, and they're really working on the emotional side very hard in regards to the people's emotions and getting people to really, get the American people to really support further intervention in Ukraine. And I feel what we're doing to the Ukrainian people is absolutely terrible, because we're pretty much willing to utilize them as sacrificial lambs at our benefit for primarily what our concern is. And so how do we reverse the current path and to what's been going on? And what I mean by that is they're really hyping it up in regards to the conversation. Is they're specifically talking about, again, and it's the neoliberals, it's the neocons. There's no longer an anti-war party. It's the Republicans and Democrats, and I want to try to avoid, you guys know when I do commentary, I really try to avoid the left-right paradigm. I'm not going to blame Biden for this. I'm not going to, applaud Trump and say Trump, this would never happen with Trump in office. We're at this situation. We're dealing with this situation at hand. And how can we as people, how can we as humanity reverse the current trajectory in the direction that we're going? And to me, that has to be the focus. But what we're currently hearing is the emotional side of it, where they're trying to build the case up and get Americans to support. Everyone remembers in Syria, they tried to do the same thing. In Syria, they tried to do the same thing in terms of providing, some type of a blockade, in terms of, hey, you know what, we're gonna have an air, we're gonna provide cover and have a no-fly zone established for Syria. You had many pilots that came out that refused to do that. They said, no, we're not going to be doing that. Everyone remembers that, the picture of the pilots they'd post a sign that said, not our war. Hopefully everyone kind of remembers that. That wasn't too long ago. But now we have a situation where not only do you have the media, the corporate U.S. media attempting to silence all other counter speech that is attempting to try to bring some peace to the situation. The next video I want to show is just kind of a couple of examples of how they're doing that. So this next video coming up is Trey Gowdy and what he had specifically to say. And I apologize, I have to go back and forth on some of these screens because I have to add the screen and go back into it. So let's listen to this clip.
Now into the second week of war in Europe. Actually, we're in the second week of watching war in Europe from afar, like a person safely looking down from a high-rise apartment onto a city street far below. You can see the victim being attacked. You offer to call the police. You offer a word of encouragement for safety. You may even alert others to the injustice you are observing. You will do almost anything except what the victim actually needs you to do, which is help. Ukraine has asked for help. Ukraine begged our senators over the weekend for help, for a no-fly zone, for weapons, for more sanctions, anything to stop the massacre. Americans have been inspired by the courage of the Ukrainian people, by their resolve, their ingenuity, their willingness to fight in the face of overwhelming odds. And Americans have been outraged at the killing of women and children, the images of families separated from family, perhaps forever.
You see how they do that? They build on the emotional side. They show the pictures of women, children, all these things occurring. And again, yes, the events unfolding. It's very tragic for the people there in Ukraine. Let's let this continue.
in an effort to simply survive. We are outraged at the multiple attempts to assassinate President Zelensky, the recklessness of Russia, and a near brush with nuclear disaster. Yes, America is inspired and outraged, just not enough to climb down from the window and actually join the fight. We are told there's a contractual obligation to defend NATO countries like Poland and Estonia and Lithuania. There's a treaty, a legal obligation, a contract, if you will, to defend. Contracts are what we sign to repay bank loans and get cell phone service. Morality does not, should not require a contract. Most of our obligations in life are not contractual. They're deeper than that. We don't need a contract to defend a victim from a bully. There's no contract in place when we see a child being attacked or an elderly person being assaulted or a single person ambushed by a larger gang. We don't need a contract to defend a neighbor. We just need to figure out who our neighbors really are. We're told Poland is worth defending. So too with Romania and Hungary and Slovakia. Those are neighbors, we're told, because we signed a contract. All that separates those we will defend from those we will not defend is a single step on a map. Each of those countries has a border with Ukraine. So our moral outrage, our duty to defend is apparently dependent upon a single step and a faint boundary line. There's a book on my bedside table that's been there for many years, The Gates of Fire. It's a 2,000-year-old story about a small group of Greek soldiers who went to fight a battle they could not win against an enemy they could not defeat. They left home to lose a battle in hopes that in the process, they could inspire others to take up arms and win the war. Sparta lost the battle at Thermopylae, but their heroism inspired others to go win the war, a war we benefit from 2,500 years later. Doing the right thing does not require a treaty. Doing the right thing does not depend upon a contract. It depends upon the will of the people. The president is the commander-in-chief, but Congress decides when to wage war. And perhaps it's time to debate what obligation we owe ourselves and others. Do we owe the Ukrainian people something more than what we provided? Do we owe ourselves something more than merely offering good wishes and hopes for safe passage so innocents can escape their homeland? Is that the best the world's greatest country can offer? Good thoughts and a safe escape route.
I have to pause it there. I just can't continue. I think there's a huge misunderstanding in terms of what a lot of the mainstream media legacy is building here, and they're looking at this escalation similar to some of the previous wars that we've been involved with, whether that's Iraq, Afghanistan, and they're stating that we have a moral dilemma here, that the United States and Americans have a moral dilemma that we're facing. Is it truly a moral dilemma that we're facing? Or is it self-interest in terms of looking out for the American people, or for that matter, for the globe? If you're thinking that in any type of equation or any type of formulas or how they project this, that effectively NATO, which is basically the United States, can establish some type of no-fly zone over Ukraine without leading to further escalation, I think that's a huge disconnect. And I think that what clearly is not understood is that Russia is an adversary. They're very challenged. They know how to fight. They have a long history. They're hardened from their years in battle. They have superior technology. And if we as a people think that this particular go round that we're going to be immune from any type of attacks or any types of things happening on US soil, that's a huge disconnect to me. I'm going to bring in Roy to talk about that, because I think that whole no-fly zone is one of the first points that we need to talk about. So I want to welcome to the stream Roy Hall of the Gospel News Network, formerly of the Coin. I'm sorry, Roy, I just lost my train of thought.
The Daily Coin.
The Daily Coin. Thank you. So Roy, let's talk about that moral dilemma that we're facing. You being a true Christian, you understanding the loss of life and what we're experiencing now. Is establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine, Is are we leading the Ukrainian people down the right path, comparing them to the Spartans? I don't remember the Spartans. I don't remember them, the 300. I don't remember them going and arming women and children and letting prisoners out of jail and giving them weapons and say, come with me in this battle.
Or being led by a Nazi. I mean,
Or being led by a Nazi, correct.
You have to remember that the soldiers, they are literal Nazis. I mean, these are not, that's Zelensky and his whole crew there. That's what they are. So we'll just have to start from that point. The no-fly zone thing, that's an act of war. Okay. And as you were pointing out, and now Blinken said yesterday, I just was listening to Tucker Carlson just before I came and plugged in. Blinken apparently was on one of the talking head shows yesterday and said that we were going to send fighter jets to Poland and then have the Ukrainian Nazis come over, board the planes, and fly them into Ukraine to fight the Russians. Okay, that's a double act of war. And as you pointed out, Putin has said on more than one occasion that the United States will not be immune if there is an act of war that is pointed at Russia, either directly from the United States or through NATO. Either one, he doesn't care. The United States will no longer be virgin to world war. He will attack, period. And what we have to remember is he has, unlike Obama, unlike Bush, unlike all the other criminals over here, he has kept his word. When he draws a line in the sand, if it's crossed, that's it. I mean, look what he did with in Syria. He went to the United Nations at the General Assembly. He said Obama's had X number of years to take care of ISIS. He hasn't done anything. We're taking over. 9 days later, he started flying missions. That was in September. By January, they had flown 3,000 air raids. 3,000 into Syria and wiped out ISIS. We didn't wipe out ISIS, as Trump likes to say. That's nonsense. And I'm sure all of you guys listening know that, but Russia wiped out ISIS. What's going on in Ukraine is not a moral dilemma. It's a dilemma of corruption. That's where the problem is. And I think that all of this is by design. I think that it's an attack on on the American economy, on the world reserve currency that is known as the Federal Reserve Note. The SWIFT system is about to get blown up. I mean, the SIPS system that you and I discussed the other day, that's tied directly to Russia. It's all what we're watching is a charade. Or am I wrong?
Well, that's a good question, because obviously what that is going to lead to, and we're already seeing some signs of it in terms of the potential, the economic impact, where there's some great conversation and a lot of people are led to believe that, especially in U.S. media, that the sanctions are so effective. Russia is going to end up isolated. And what we're actually seeing is quite a bit of a reversal of that, Rory. We're seeing a huge continued de-escalation, or I'm sorry, de-dollarization that's happening globally. So we've never understood the blowback. When we did the COVID lockdowns and we had all those policies and everything, we never understood the blowback. And I know a lot of people are saying that, hey, this is a design to the chessboard because they're going to reset the global economy, the global currency. It's going to go to complete digital. So I understand very much why some people are saying that, but I think we're giving them too much credit. I don't think that they're smart enough to do that, because if you look at the amount of wealth that's going to be impacted, and to see the dollar hegemony going away, I'm not sure how they're going to flip that and at the same time not yield or concede some type of power, especially if there's any further escalation. because what's currently happening is that, like, for especially here in the United States and also for around the globe, particularly Europe. It's Europe right now that's really pushing this narrative. The UK, and the United States, the same two countries that lined up with Iraq and the wars in the Middle East. But this isn't going to be isolated. This isn't going to be just a regional type escalation that's going to occur. And they're already seeing the writing on the wall in terms of the events unfolding. And so we have the neocon base that's getting really excited about the potential of an escalation with Ukraine and Russia. And here's the challenging thing, and why I ask us Americans, and I know we have a pretty large audience, global audience, and I'm referring to everything here in the United States because we're leading a lot of the conversation there in Ukraine and Russia. But think of our 20 or 25-year war in Afghanistan. Think of how that ended. And you're talking about just one theater that we were involved with, and we couldn't even manage that. So literally there was a meme at one time that I shared, and it basically said that if you have confidence in our government and our things, think of it this way, that it took 20 years for us to go into Afghanistan to basically give back Afghanistan to the Taliban.
Exactly.
It took us, and how many trillions of dollars did that take? So if we're looking at this from a geostrategic, they've war gamed this several times, and they know that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to maintain two theaters for the United States, for NATO to go up against Russia and China. But that's what's being advocated, and that's what makes this so dangerous. They're already foretelling what they see is happening. As a matter of fact, Pompeo was in Taiwan this past week and was already trying to make some advances in terms of what that discussion. And lo and behold, who pops on the scene to really advocate this? So let's bring this into play, Rory, because I think this is mind blowing that we'd have anyone with any type of responsibility thinking that we could do something like this. So let's bring this into play.
I want to bring in the former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. Nice to see you here live and in person in New York. Europe hasn't seen a refugee crisis like this in 23 years. You have to go back to Kosovo. And that was relatively short-lived then. And what Kano lays out there is a long and complicated and multiplying issue for all of Europe.
It's why this is such a catastrophe, right? It's the million people. I mean, thank goodness for Poland and everyone being so welcoming. But this is going to be a huge effect on all of those European countries that are taking these refugees in. And the world is to see what's going to happen. And it's not over. This is going to last a long time. And you're going to see some dramatic effects on Europe.
The UN General Assembly yesterday had a vote. You know the UN well. Okay, so here was the vote tally. 141 countries voted in favor of a resolution deploring Russia's aggression against Ukraine. There were 4 countries that joined Russia in voting against the resolution, and 35 abstained. So I can understand the 4 that joined Russia, right? The abstentions are kind of interesting. What did you make of that vote yesterday? What did it mean?
Well, it's always good when you've got the entire world coming together to condemn, a violent dictator and everything that he's doing. I mean, there's no surprise that Russia's standing with Syria and North Korea, right? Those aren't great friends to have. You talk about the abstentions. I mean, I think it's also the reason why I think it's fascinating that the Arab community has not spoken up when this is an oil war too, and the reason that's happening is they don't trust that America will lead. And they don't trust that Putin will lose. So it's a tough situation. So all of those abstentions were, we don't know where to go. Look at India. Yeah. Look at some of these countries that are doing it. They don't know what's going
on. So much of this comes back to what's in the best interest of all these countries and these leaders. Here were those who joined voting with Russia. It was Belarus, obviously.
Yes.
North Korea, obviously. Syria, obviously. And Eritrea and Northeastern Africa. Mm-hmm. Other than that, you had a great portion of the world vote in favor of what they were going for yesterday. Now, we saw this report yesterday. I don't know if it's true, but these Chechen fighters who are fighting on behalf of Putin's army went into went into Ukraine. Apparently, they were met with fierce fire, and the Ukrainians knocked them down. They are saying that they were tipped off by somebody back in Moscow. Might be the case. It might not. Putin, in all these pictures and all this video, he's sitting at the end of this very long table and has no direct contact with other human beings. Maybe it's COVID, or maybe he has innate sense of paranoia among the people who are around him in Moscow.
You know, like,
how much have you considered that possibility?
I think he knows that there's a threat that he would be eliminated because he's trying to eliminate Zelensky, right? And so when you see the whole world coming against you, he was already paranoid before. I think you're going to see this move further. But I mean, this goes to how evil he is. I mean, keep in mind, this is the same man that helped, you know, Syria use chemical weapons against women and children. This is the same man who allowed for Malaysian Air to come down, you know, to be shot down. This is the same man who tried to poison opponents and get them killed. So, you know, this is not a good actor. But then you go and you put this situation where he's being pushed in a corner. He absolutely is going to be paranoid.
It's interesting, too, that I read about Turkey and Erdogan.
I'm going to forward this for a minute.
Cared about the medal count, believe it or not, he does. And then secondly, he wasn't going to upset China. You know, there was no need to do that. He wasn't going to upset China. So he waited until after, and now he started to move. What we have to make sure we're doing is all eyes need to continue to be on China. As tragic as this is, China's looking at Russia saying this was sloppy. They didn't do it well. But China's not saying, okay, this is going to keep us from moving in on Taiwan. What they're saying is, okay, who's sending arms to Ukraine? Which companies are pulling out of Russia? How is the world reacting? This is about making sure their strategy is different. It's not if, it's when. They will move on Taiwan. They're just learning from every bit of this. And this should be a lesson to the world that the dependency Russia had on Europe and how dangerous that was, the dependency that the world has on China is going to be even bigger, stronger, and worse.
It's a great point. We're going to get to the oligarchs in a moment here, but I just want to get your commentary on it because you've met many of them because they come to New York. They make a lot of money by traveling all over the world.
Okay, so that wasn't quite the entire video I thought it was, and maybe it was a different video where they were actually advocating to go ahead and advance and putting arms in the Ukraine, or I'm sorry, in Taiwan, which again, just going back, taking a look at the theater of understanding, you know, of the events unfolding, you know, rapidly, and that dependency that's there. And that's what I want people to understand is when that comment is made that, you know, every war is a banker's war, because Rory, what we're experiencing more is a lot over the influence over the European Union as it relates to the United States and dollar hegemony, you know, versus a evolving world and looking at the multinational world that we're evolving to in regards to the One Belt, One Road. You know, we can all prosper through this, but unfortunately, there's a lot of powers that be, Rory, that aren't willing to do that. We still want to control things either through regime change, through fiscal, monetary, different types of policy. We've seen that before numerous times. And if you look at, I mean, we can't put sanctions on every country that's out there, but that's what they're advocating for. So it gets very challenging,
to say the least. And to think that we are not arming Taiwanese, I think that's probably happening. I don't know that it is. I haven't heard any reports. I haven't seen any reports, but I think that it would be a little naive on my part to think otherwise, because they know that's coming. Everybody knows that that's coming. Anybody that's watching this, and what I find interesting about what's going on with Ukraine right now, CJ, is that something that you pointed out a moment ago was that Russia does in fact have superior military armament to most of the rest of the world, and I mean they've got some of the best weapon systems out there anywhere. Period. And in 2015, the CIA did a series of 16 different war games. Remember Jim Rickards? Was
Absolutely.
in on that.
Yep.
Guess how many? And it was specifically against Russia. And guess how many the United States won out of the 16?
I think it was the goose egg, Rory.
It was a big fat zero. That's correct. So they already know that. They've already got that. And they just did another series of war games against Russia. And they probably, I'm sure in both cases that China played a role. How big a role, I'm not sure. But China, India, Russia, Syria, and several other countries that are right around there that are important. They've been in alliance. They've been in alliance for a very long time. This is not a secret. And what cracks me up about, like that report, Nikki Haley not even recognizing or bringing to the table the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Belt and Road Initiative, none of this, which ties these nations at the hip.
Yeah.
They have the dominance of the population. The largest part of the global population belongs to those alliances, not the United States, not NATO,
Right.
not
Yeah.
not any of the ASEAN paper or whatever that nonsense that Obama was trying to put together. They don't belong to that
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. That's a great point, Rory, and how that unfolds. There's been some really good commentary and some much more talented people that understand it, and as it regards to my contribution, and I encourage everyone to go read it for themselves, is to jump over to the Saker site, a bird's eye view of the Saker, and we've interviewed the Saker. It's been a long time, and there's a couple different articles. There's two I want to draw everyone's attention to. The first one is by Pepe Escobar. I think all of our listeners are very familiar, and he pretty much has documented specifically how Russia can counterpunch the U.S. and the EU, and basically navigate through this transitional period that they're currently doing. Yes, is there going to be impact in Russia? Absolutely. Is there propaganda on both sides of the fence? Absolutely, that's going to happen. But they know, and in particular, they've planned for this. They've mapped this out. In the grand scheme of the chessboard, they're always 3 or 4 moves ahead, and so they have their envelopes. I can't remember who coined it this way or stated it this way. They have their envelopes. If this happens, we're going to pull this envelope. If this happens, we're going to pull this envelope. Michael Hudson, I'm sure everyone's very familiar with Michael Hudson, and again, he wrote a great article. It's also up on the Saker. It's called "The American Empire Self-Destructs," but nobody thought that would happen this fast. And he just specifically goes through in terms of what we're witnessing. And we've talked about it for quite a bit. Roy, you have, I know we have at Rogue, in regards to this massive transition period that we're going through. There was also, Pepe put out an interesting link that I was able to capture. Now you're going to have to read the closed captions for this because it's in Russian. But this was also a very interesting. This was just from yesterday in regards to Putin explaining the military situation in Ukraine and why Ukraine may lose its future. So let's just play just a little bit of this.
С текущей ситуацией на Украине.
Да.
Мы все поддерживаем ваши действия, поддерживаем проведение спецоперации, которые сейчас там происходят. И, конечно, самый главный вопрос, который так или иначе задавал себе каждый из нас в последнее время, почему началась эта спецоперация, и неужели ее нельзя было избежать? Разумом мы понимаем и всячески поддерживаем ваши действия, но женское сердце наше неспокойно. За родных, за близких, за тех, кто остался на Украине. Мы знаем, что гражданское население не страдает, но все-таки скажите нам, успокойте нас, что ждет нас в конце этого пути? Чем должна закончиться военная операция на Украине? Спасибо.
Я очень коротко, но все-таки вынужден начать, как в таких случаях говорят, с центра поля. Я сказал об этом при начале операции и говорил до того, как было принято это решение. Тяжелое решение, без всяких сомнений. В чем дело? Дело в том, что после государственного антиконституционного переворота на Украине, который активно поддерживался, к сожалению, западными странами, ну чего греха таить, они же не скрывают это, прямо сказали, что затратили на это $5 миллиардов. пирожки там горячие раздавали на Майдане и так далее. А потом вместо того, чтобы вернуть ситуацию, даже если она вышла из-под контроля, даже если это так называемый эксцесс исполнителя, есть такое юридическое понятие, то есть планировали одно, сделали другое, все равно могли и должны были бы вернуть эту ситуацию в политическое русло. Тем более, что накануне этого госпереворота приехали 3 министра иностранных дел в Киев в 2014 году и подписали с действующей властью тогда соглашение и выступили в качестве гарантов этих договоренностей о том, что ситуация будет развиваться в политическом русле. Нет, ничего подобного. Совершили госпереворот, поддержали тех, кто совершил госпереворот, а затем последовали известные события, связанные с Крымом и с юго-востоком Украины, с Донбассом, где люди не поддержали этот переворот. Крым, как известно, принял решение, люди пришли на референдум и проголосовали вернуться в состав Российской Федерации. И естественно, мы не могли этого не поддержать. Тем более, что они подвергались опасности со стороны националистов и неофашистов. Я сейчас скажу, что есть полное подтверждение тому, что они тогда были правы. А потом начались события, или параллельно практически на Донбассе. К чему это привело? Люди, которые, по сути, начали сопротивляться такому развитию событий, начали подвергаться преследованию. И на этой территории киевские власти начали проводить военные операции. Провели 2 крупномасштабных карательных военных операции с применением тяжелой техники, авиации боевой. Прямо били, значит, по Донецку. Прям по площадям лупили сверху. Значит, на танки, авиации и так далее. Обе эти кампании военные оказались провальными. Они потерпели поражение. После этого возникли так называемые Минские соглашения или комплекс мер, как его официально называют.
Well, pause it there, Rory. And it looks like we also have someone else joining this conversation. I'll bring them in just a moment. Let me take that out. But a great documentary that I posted the link to. I tweeted out a couple times, but it's called Ukraine on Fire, and I think that's important for all those tuning in particular. You know, I'm no expert on Ukraine and you know, Russia and the vast history that's there. But if you go watch that documentary, Ukraine on Fire, it goes through the vast history of Ukraine, and it's truly made very well. You know, looking at different perspectives and different angles. But I think the history of it going back was that, and what the takeaway from Putin was stated was that there were agreements that were reached, the Minsk agreement, where there were supposed to be, you know, the agreements were set in place to avoid this situation that we're currently in, Rory. And the difficult part of getting to this is that we have people who are negotiating on bad faith, and this is like the second or third time that I've stated that, because you cannot be attempting to do a ceasefire or a truce or de-escalate events, yet at the same time you have one party that's stating ship us more weapons. We need to, yes, Oliver Stone documentary. Thank you, Raven. Ship us more weapons. We need fighter jets. We need these things, versus a true effort to get to the negotiating table to dial this back. And that's why it's becoming even more difficult at this, well past the 11th hour. We're in the thick of this. It's no more the fog of war or anything like that. We are heading for a very much of a challenging situation. And Roy, my thoughts are, in terms of how we dial that back, is twofold. One is that right now the legacy media, the politicians are working overdrive on the mind state of Americans and the propaganda. They're really trying to advocate and get that same type of support that we witnessed post 9/11, where you had people who were willing to, you know, kids dropping out of college and joining the military and, you know, willing to go fight that war. They're looking for that type of level of support, you know, for Ukraine, and drawing that up. The challenging thing to get people to understand is that there's a real potential, and we're starting to hear certain things like, you know, Marco Rubio stated the other day that, hey, look, you know, there could be some type of a nuclear thing take place. There could be a cyber attack here in the United States. Is that were very familiar with false flags. Even the State Department admitted that, they specifically came out and, where before, 5 years ago, we only heard about false flags on InfoWars, but now we're openly talking about those in public. And that's what we want to try to prevent. We don't want another event or something to take place that draws America into this conflict. I want to bring Andrew into it as well, Rory. So, Andrew Gonzalez, welcome to the stream. What say you?
Hello, hello, hello. You. Can you hear
Go
me?
ahead, Andrew.
All right, I was just talking about like how devastating this war is, but I feel like it's really underrated and like Russia's very mid so far. I feel like like I could ratio Russia on Twitter and they wouldn't care. So like Putin needs to step up his game in my opinion. As a right-wing communist myself, like Putin needs to step it up.
Well, in regards to, right wing and communism and everything else like that, I think that the both parties, in terms of what's going on, and Zelensky, he's obviously is not negotiating any type of good faith, and we have two huge factions that are coming at each other. But I think the goal of this conversation is to really find a way to de-escalate. And I know what you're stating, that you think from your perspective that Putin needs to be more aggressive, more offensive going into this situation to kind of quell those things from taking place.
Yes.
But what's happening right now is in the eye of public opinion, and what's taking place is with the suppression of not only RT but Sputnik. We're getting just one side of the story that's unfolding here, and that's what makes it so difficult. But I think any loss of life is very challenging, and you know as well as I do that, in particular to the people that live there in Ukraine, it's just not all neo-Nazis. Obviously, there's a good chunk of Russian people, and I can't tell you at this point that all of them have vacated and got out of Ukraine. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like Putin's gonna get like heavy into NFTs this year. I feel like he's gonna make one, and I feel like Putin's kind of a coper. He self-projects a lot. He hangs around a lot of like bad people who cope from New Jersey, self-projecting, like
Yeah.
very bad stuff. So in my opinion, he's like I feel like Bernie Gore's is gonna step it back up for him in like the electoral race in Russia, because that's who I would like go for, Bernie Gore's, and
I
also
don't know.
Jordy Jordan.
Yeah, obviously you're much more brushed on what's happening there in Russia. I
Yeah.
know that the State Department would be advocating for any type of regime change there in Russia, and they would want much more of a Western back, and that could be part of their goal as well, trying to push that narrative there that's with Putin. I mean, he's been in since what, 2020? Is that right? 20, coming up on 20
Yeah,
years that
2020.
he's been in place. But if you look at the collapse of the Soviet Union and you document, exactly how that unfolded, you see a lot of bad actors, even in Russia. Boris Yeltsin, people that were willing to basically become sacrificial lambs to the West, and it became. But what Putin has done is really try to really focus on industry, really focus on trade deals. I don't think that he's out to reinstate the Russian Empire. If those are his ambitions, I don't know. Maybe they are. I don't think that they are. I think he's a grand chess player. I think has studied this for a long time, and I think what he wants is more for to protect the Russian people and to allow the multipolar world to evolve into the One Belt Road Project, and allow for trade, for commerce with various platforms. It's something he's always advocated for, and I would much rather deal with someone with that type of sense of responsibility for humanity, of keeping people safe, versus the escalation. I think he had no choice to take the action that he did. I think we pretty much, whenever there was no negotiations, when we were negotiating bad faith, we wouldn't even attempt to even negotiate the whole concept of, listen, we need to just go ahead and remove our request to join NATO. When there was no attempt to do that, it really it really pushed him into a corner to say, okay, well, if you're going to play that game, and then Zelensky came out and said, well, maybe we need to think about becoming a nuclear power again. Maybe we need nuclear weapons in Ukraine. I think that just really was the nail in the coffin.
Exactly. I feel like Putin, the whole thing with the glass doors with him is terrible, terrible. I don't feel like he should be implanting orbs into like people's ears at birth. At least in Russia, he shouldn't really be doing that. And he shouldn't like at least like learn how to like at least crack 90s if he's the president. If he can't do
Yeah.
that as the president, it's
Yeah.
terrible.
I'm gonna transition for just a moment, Andrew. So
Okay.
if you could hang on, just a second. So I want to transition for just a second, because in American politics, there's not a whole lot of people that are talking common sense right now. One of those persons who always comes to my mind that's kind of level set a little bit. You don't always have to agree with everything she says. I know I don't, but this is what Tulsi Gabbard had to say tonight about what's unfolding.
Oh, I love Tulsi Gabbard.
Months ago, basically saying, yeah, you're NATO, you're on the way, you're getting there, you're close. Did anybody in Washington think that might have been a little provocative? And I'm not blaming the Americans for everything that Russia does. I'm just saying it takes a little touch to handle a buffer state like Ukraine. Don't you think so?
Yeah, Jesse, you know, as you said, there is so much devastation and incredible suffering that's going on in Ukraine right now, and the world needs to condemn Putin for his actions. The thing here is that our leaders really have this FU attitude, and they just don't care. We see this FU attitude in our domestic policy here at home, where they're saying, you know what, FU to parents who are concerned about what their kids are being taught in their schools, FU to Americans who want to make their own decisions as it relates to their health and COVID. And then you see this same attitude and mindset also extending to their decisions on our foreign policy, basically going in and saying, you know what, this is what we're going to do. Any other country in the world, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. There's nothing anyone can do to stop us. And all of this just points to the fact that they just don't care, because, Jesse, if they did, then before making these decisions, before taking these actions, they would stop and think for more than just a moment about what the ramifications and consequences of those decisions will be. Who will they impact the most? How will they impact the American people, the people of these other countries? What will the cost be? Is it worth it? What is our objective, and what are we trying to accomplish? Does it serve the best interest of our country? These are the things that they would be considering before they make these decisions. And it's just clear to me that they're not. And I look back to 1996, something that exemplifies this FU attitude and their lack of care for people was when Madeleine Albright was asked about her reaction to the sanctions, U.S. sanctions policy against Iraq that had killed 500,000. And as you know, her response was chilling when she said it was worth it.
Well, the Biden administration is going to have to ask themselves this question. Is this worth it? I looked at the market today when I came into work. It's down, 700, 800 points. People are losing their jobs. People will have to choose whether they're going to buy groceries or gasoline. Oh, and by the way, Americans are possibly going to enforce a no-fly zone, and thousands of innocent civilians are dying in Ukraine. And it seems like we just hurtled ourselves into the situation right after a pandemic, Tulsi. Right when we're trying to recover from a pandemic, we're trying to keep our eye on China. We're trying to make sure the American people are healthy and can work and can live. And now we're in a war in Europe almost, and we can't afford anything, and we're facing a recession. Do you think anybody thought this through?
It certainly doesn't seem like it. Or a more cynical view was that they did think it through, and what is playing out is exactly what they had aimed for. The greatest tragedy in all of this, Jesse, is that this devastation, all of this suffering that's going on, this could have been prevented had we had leaders who put the interests of people first.
Stop it there, because I think she's let me pause it real quick because the audio is still going on my end. But I think that's a very valid point in terms of what, this could have been prevented. We're past that point now. I agree. Crypto King, Tulsi CFR, yep, Council of Foreign Relations, totally get that. Right now, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of people that are talking any type of common sense as we're attempting to de-escalate this this event from unfolding. And my fear is that they're starting to win somewhat of the propaganda war. And what I mean by that is there was a recent poll, and this was brought forth. I think I captured this on. Here we go. Yeah, this was on Breaking Points with Crystal and Siger, who broke down a lot of the numbers and as it relates to the support for potential for some type of no-fly zone over Ukraine, and these numbers are pretty staggering, the direction that it's going. So let me add this and play this.
Of the American public on all of this. There's some new polling that shows basically Americans are super on board with everything except for actual boots on the ground, including measures that are terrible ideas and would probably result in boots on the ground and World War III and potential nuclear conflict. Let's go ahead and put this tweet up on the screen that kind of just a good summation of this latest Economist, I think it was Economist YouGov, but definitely YouGov poll. Net support in the USA for sanctions, plus 51. Sending money, plus 43. Sending weapons, plus 38. Sending troops to NATO, plus 31. Here's where things get really scary. No fly zone support, plus 25. Also scary, Ukraine in NATO, plus 20. Then you get to the place, okay, cyber attack on Russia. There's basically like equal split in favor and against. This is also a terrible idea, guys. Sending soldiers to help, but not to fight. Okay, that has -5, only -5, also a little scary. Drone attacks on Russia, -19. Airstrike on Russia, -33, and sending soldiers to actually fight, -35. So again, the fact that you have such bipartisan, strong support for a no-fly zone, which I hope we have adequately explained to you here multiple times, you're talking about World War III, is deeply, deeply disturbing. And why do you have such broad support among the public for something that is so dramatically escalatory and extremely dangerous for the world? Well, in part, it's because the media has done a terrible job of helping people to understand what this actually means. And not only that, they're pushing, we played you the clips of them pushing Kamala Harris and other officials like, why won't you do more? Why won't you do a no-fly zone? Here's the latest iteration of that. Chuck Todd pushing Secretary of State Tony Blinken. Why are you ruling out a no-fly zone? Let's take a listen.
The president's been very clear about one thing all along as well, which is we're not going to put the United States in direct conflict with Russia, not have American planes flying against Russian planes, or our soldiers on the ground in Ukraine, because for everything we're doing for Ukraine, the president also has a responsibility to not get us into a direct conflict, a direct war with Russia, a nuclear power, and risk a war that expands even beyond Ukraine to Europe. That's clearly not our interest. What we're trying to do is end this war in Ukraine, not start a larger one.
So
I'm going to end it there, and hopefully my mic is working again. Can you hear me okay, Rory?
Oh, yeah.
I think I had the pause button down a little bit too long. Exactly. We're a nation of... Well, the only thing that I have to state, because I shouldn't say I totally get, but if you look at the amount of propaganda that's being pushed out right now and really building on the emotional side of this, you can it's easy to understand. And then they're suppressing, they're shutting down news outlets, and they're really trying to create just basically just the narrative is just one way, right? It's one way narrative right now. You can see why those polling numbers are going up, Rory. But my thought is this: is that think about where we were 2 or 3 years ago, and the information that came at us about the lockdowns, about what we should be doing, what we need to be doing. We're kind of seeing that same narrative being played out And we as a people have to ask ourselves, is that how much trust do we really want to give to the legacy media? How much trust do we want to give to our alphabet agencies, to our government, that they're going to make the right decisions that aren't going to create worse harm in terms of making things worse? And I think this. Go ahead, Roy.
Well, I was going to say, anybody that trusts the legacy media or any of the people talking on TV, any of the politicians, like, you know, that bureaucrat Blinken or Kamala or Biden, Psaki, any of these people, if you believe anything that they're saying, then that's on you. Because if you've not been lied enough to this point to understand that they're still lying, then what can I say to change your mind? What can I do other than show you body bags that say they're still lying to you, and they still hate you, and they're still going to continue stealing not only your wealth, but your children's wealth and your grandchildren's wealth and your great 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 grandchildren's wealth? What part of this cannot be understood at this point? I mean, seriously, I don't understand that. And I wanted to comment about Russia. You know, gentleman that Andrew was on just a moment ago, and Douglas McGregor was on Tucker Carlson tonight. He's a retired general, very knowledgeable. I actually have a lot of respect for him. Do I trust him? Probably not. But one of the things that he said lines up with what I know to be true. And that is that Russia has a lot of food. Russia has oil, obviously. They have a lot of gold. They have almost no debt. Okay. This makes them a very powerful country. If you combine that with the power that we know that China possesses, then you have a formidable alliance. You have a formidable enemy, if you will, or counterbalance to the United States, period. Putin has said over and over, don't try to bring Ukraine into NATO. And Kamala comes out to the world and says, so basically, I'm paraphrased, you know, so don't hold me to the exact words, that she's telling Zelensky, welcome, and we're glad you're ready to join NATO. The next day, what happened? What we're talking about right now, the next day.
Right.
He's not playing. It's what we talked about a minute ago. When he says, here's the red line, then that's it. If it gets crossed, then all bets are off.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, let's dial it over to the chat room a little bit. I want to hear from our chat room in terms of what you feel needs to take place, the next steps. So, going to open up. I'll bring your comments up directly into the stream. You know, again, I looked at it, you know, kind of twofold. I think the first thing that we need to do is to really try to get. I say this and I mean it, because everyone knows how much I love America. I love our country. I you know, I support our troops. You know, all that kind of good stuff. And I get a little frustrated, and kind of the same thing happened with COVID, Rory. I got frustrated because I just didn't think people were paying enough attention. You know, everyone, you know, we want instant gratification too much. We want to feel that, hey, if I put a flag next to my social media picture, or I put a hashtag after, then I've done my part. And I say this like every holiday that comes around, whether it's, you know, Independence Day, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, that if you truly support our military, if you truly support things, now is the time to become involved and become outspoken about it, and not hold back, because it's going to take a lot more than a handful of people, Rory, that are in our space in terms of media, a lot more people who truly understand things. There's a lot of people that are trying their hardest to really try to counter this narrative that's being played out. But they learned a lot. They're being very effective on how they're managing this. However, you cannot avoid the economic toll that we're starting to witness. We're starting to see oil prices through the roof. We're starting to see how that's affecting people. The price at the pump, I believe the national average today was $4 a gallon on average. We're going to begin to see this. You mentioned that between Ukraine and Russia, they're like 40% of the world supply of wheat that's out there. So what is that going to do to, and you may think of that, yeah, we can produce wheat other places, but when you have a 40% reduction in terms of your total inventory, that's just going to raise your prices. You're going to see some pretty significant, price increases. So the economic numbers don't lie, and the economic impact that's going to be taking place for Americans, you have to understand what's happening. And we have people that are being very disconnected from this, very disingenuous. For a perfect example today, I'm not going to state their name. We had one political person when they were asking him specifically about the price of fuel and for gasoline, he said, well, you can just go buy an electric car. You know what?
Right.
The working poor of our country, even somewhat the middle class, that's not what they want to hear right now, Rory. People are already strapped. People are already, working to try to make sure that they can make ends meet. The last thing that they want to hear is that they need to go replace their vehicle that they struggle with to maintain with maintenance, that to go out and buy an electric vehicle. So we're dealing with people who are very disconnected from reality, that they don't live into it. So that to me is one of the first steps, is try to work really hard to counter the narrative that's being built. The second piece of it is to really try to establish that, and again, how we impact this is either call legislatures, but we have to be more effective in terms of our State Department and how they're managing these conversations. And it's going to be a tough pill to swallow. I don't think it's ever going to happen, Rory, but for them to state, hey, you know what, for right now, Zelensky, Ukraine, they're not going to be offered NATO membership. Not that our word is much good, but draw on paper, put it in writing about, hey, these are the terms, this is what's going to happen, this is the first step that needs to take place, and have some honest debate and dialogue in regards to that versus the ante, upping the ante in terms of the weapons that are being sent, and just raising the volume level of what's making it even more difficult to get to that negotiating table. So that's what we need to understand. The third part is the reality check. The third part of those is the reality check that if this escalation occurs, we're not going to be isolated here in the United States. We're not. And people need to understand that, and think of the calculated risk that's associated with escalating these events, the calculated risk and the potential for blowback. And Rory, we're already witnessing some of the blowback that's occurring right now to our markets, to what's happening with the economy, that's going to be felt for a minute, Rory.
For a long minute, actually. And food prices are going up. Gas, where I live here in Middle Tennessee, has gone up 40 cents in the last 8 days. It went up 10 cents today. I filled up my car this morning at $3.99 a gallon and drove I had about an hour and a half to go to visit a friend of mine. Came back, it had gone up to $4.09, which is the national average right now is about $4.10 a gallon, somewhere around there. And gold is at an all-time high. I mean, it's right. It breached 2,000 today. Gas has never been as high as it is right now. It's never been in the history of the world has gas been this high ever. And it's going to be in short supply. They were talking about, I heard a comment earlier today that if there are sanctions against Russian oil, then Putin would ask for $300 a barrel for Russian oil. And that's, you're talking about 2.5 times about 2.5 times what it is right now. So if you can imagine $15 a gallon gas, then that's what we're talking about. As far as wheat, what you had mentioned just a moment ago,
Yep.
it touches everything.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it does.
the mainstream media narrative is they are grooming. They have been grooming. They jumped from, look at how quickly the COVID narrative was dropped, and immediately picked up the support Ukraine narrative. Not there's a war going on, not that there's something awful and hideous that and lives are being lost. You need to support Ukraine. Period.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. That was too funny. Yeah, I'll cut that out. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So long story short, yeah. Did you hear the laughter, whoever that was? So that's going to happen, you know, but it was for a second. So, but I want to close with this, Rory, in regards to what's the events unfolding. But we have to keep our eye. I'm not sure what the markets are going to open up tomorrow to, but I know that the futures index, it looks like it's dipping low. We're seeing some gold had some price movement today, which was which we knew was probably going to happen. It drove the cryptos down a little bit. So the financial impact of that is definitely is not good. So Rory, any closing thoughts before we close out this session?
Just everybody stay close to your family. You know, if you can find some spare gas cans, I would suggest filling them up, because if anybody trusts what they're doing right now, then good luck with that. But I mean, that's what I'm doing. That's what we're doing is locating 10-gallon containers to store some gas, so that we've got 2 or 3 weeks worth that we can safely, securely store and have in case something breaks, and we're just going to start rotating it into the vehicle and always have them full. So
Absolutely.
that's you know, get as much food as you can, because if you've not noticed, shelves are emptying again. There's a couple of things that are causing that. And stay close to your loved ones. I cannot stress that enough. Stay close to your loved ones.
Absolutely. And Roy, do us a favor. Go ahead and plug your sites for us, if you would, please. Your sites and also your social media handles.
All right. It's gospelnewsnetwork.org. You can come over and check out what I got going on over there. Follow me on Twitter at it's kind of weird. Just look up Gospel News Network and you'll be able to find me. Or you can plug in through the website. Twitter gave it some kind of weird handle. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Rory at TDC, which is my old Daily Coin handle. So that's where you'll find me for the most part. I do have a Gospel News Network on Gitter, and as soon as Truth Social opens up to desktop, then I will be on there as well. It's not open to desktop at this point. So.
Gotcha. Well, Rory, thank you so much for joining the stream. I really appreciate it. God bless you and your family, and I'm confident we'll do this again real soon, Rory.
Sounds great. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. If you haven't done so yet, do me a huge favor. Jump over, hit that subscribe button on this YouTube channel. I've explained it, I believe. Probably not. I haven't explained it again. This is just some, my attempt to really kind of create like a little different, media type content that's available, looking more towards, getting involvement from the audience, making it a little bit more interactive. But if you could hit that subscribe button, and then also follow my personal work over on Twitter, which is at producer CJ1. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. God bless, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.